5:14, 2 decades ago, Butler professor Dr. Catherine Hagerman Pangan moved from Carmel to New York City to begin her doctoral work in education. Then 9/11 happened and her life was turned upside down.
She's never sat down for an in-depth discussion about the things that she experienced and felt on that Tuesday morning 20 years ago. Until now. For this Indiana teacher, it was an ultimate lesson in history.
Now, if you look at the second building, there are two, that both Twin Towers now are on fire.
So here we are at the 20th anniversary. What does it seem like yesterday for you?
It feels like yesterday for me. It feels like it just happened 24 hours ago. I was hesitant to do this interview because it still feels so raw after 20 years.
So how long were you in New York City before 9/11?
I moved from Indiana to New York City 6 days before 9/11, and the experience completely changed my life. My first day of class was 9/11, and the Twin Towers are falling. I remember that people they didn't run, they just started walking really quickly, like ants, just scattering. It seemed like the world turned upside down. I didn't want to go out anywhere because I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. My apartment was in between two streets, and one street had the incoming fire trucks that were covered in ash, and the fire men and women were just completely covered. It was like watching gray people. My husband, though, was in Indiana.
So your husband didn't get a chance to talk to you until several days after 9/11?
Correct. I just remember that feeling of relief, getting to hear his voice. The smell of ash and burning steel is something that I will never get out of my mind. And then the day after, I remember we all were just trying to process what had happened, and random strangers would stop and say, "How are you doing? Did you lose anyone? How's your family?" And people that just came together in such incredible ways. And that feeling also will stick with me forever.
How did you keep your career going?
So I was in charge of supervising student teachers that were going through the program at Columbia. One of the classrooms was a class full of 5th graders. They were on the 6th floor of a building in Chinatown and saw the entire thing happen. Acknowledging the trauma that they witnessed was something that changed my career. How do you deal with students who had lost parents and aunts and siblings and loved ones? Every 9/11, I think, oh, how old are those 5th graders now? Or how old were those kindergartners who experienced that? It was interesting seeing 9/11 through children's eyes as it happened.
So did your husband eventually move to New York City?
No, he didn't. So he worked for Raytheon at the time. So he was asked to stay in Indianapolis to help with the increase in weapon design, and so we had a commuter marriage.
So you were there for 4 years. What made you finally leave New York City?
I got pregnant. Ironically, my son is named Hudson for the Hudson River.
How old's Hudson now?
He's 16. He's a junior at North Central. I have a daughter who is 10, and the reason I'm doing this interview is for her. She wanted to hear the story.
20 years later, what would you say to them?
I would say I can't wait to get back to New York City so we can explore together, and I can show you the places and you can experience the people that helped shape my life from that time forward.
Making it a positive.
Yep, I would make it a positive.
Dr. Pangan still has the shoes that she was wearing on that day 20 years ago, and they're still covered in the dust from ground zero. When she shows those shoes to her students at Butler, they've got a million questions, and it's not lost on her that most of the students on campus right now have no recollection of the events of that morning 20 years ago because they weren't alive. To watch the entire 22-minute long interview, just go to WTHR.com.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. And that was very brave of her to do that. When you keep something bottled up for 20 years and then decide to release it, but we appreciate that.
Well, it was one of those things where there's a lot more that she talked about, and it's tough to kind of encompass that day into 3 minutes. But she really wanted to stress it's for her kids. She's talking right now for her kids.
It's important we do things like this because there's a whole generation now that knows nothing of it other than what they've seen on TV or read in a book.
It's their Pearl Harbor.
Right.
They look at it like we look at Pearl Harbor, and you know it's history to them, and for us it was real. So
Yeah, to have the emotions that we have attached to that day. Yeah, and great piece. Carlos loved hearing from her, and I like how she's going to twist it to be a positive for her and her family.